It's time for our big story presented by U.S. Army. What's your warrior? Now, Zach Wilson is expected to have his name called as the #2 pick on the Jets on Thursday. The New York Post says New York has been a, quote, tortured 45-year quest for their franchise quarterback. And now they're turned to the former BYU standout. They added, if Wilson starts week 1, he'll be the 35th different starting quarterback since Joe Namath in 1976. Yikes. That's not good. So, Marcella, should we have doubts about Zach Wilson saving the Jets?
Doubts? Yes, we should have doubts. Look, a lot of people don't even know who Zach Wilson is. Stop lying. You just heard his name because the Jets keep talking about him, kind of. And a lot of people do know what the Jets are in terms of futility. So that sounds like a bad sentence. The unknown mixed with the bad. You would have doubts. I remind you what I tell my family, tell my kids about doubt. It's not a detour. Doubt isn't. Unless you don't believe or you can't achieve. So I don't give a damn if you doubt me all you want. Only it matters if I doubt me or I don't think I could get the job done. So, Zach Wilson, whatever I'm about to say, don't let it discourage you and detour you unless you don't believe yourself. Zach Wilson has an interesting career right here. A lot of people talk about the great 2020 season, but then when you look at him in detail, you start to say, what happened to other 2 seasons? We talk about the shoulder injuries, hand injuries. We talk about him being 2-4 against top competition, ranked opponents. So it doesn't look like a guy who's greater than his circumstances over there at BYU. Look, his collegiate career record, 20-11. Everything kind of sells you to believe mediocrity plus. Well, you got to be exceptional if you're going to go to the Jets and be an exception, which means I'm going to be a franchise quarterback here to stay. Why? Because the Jets over the last 25 seasons have had 22 different quarterbacks. So the only way to be an exception is to be exceptional. And that's why there is some doubt about Zach Wilson. Is he exceptional? I'm not so certain. I'm not into the whole, what you read and what people are trying to say, the Jets and futility and the culture. Because last time I checked, you can look at the Chicago Bulls right now and say, that ain't Michael Jordan's Chicago Bulls. And you can look at Tom Brady's Tampa Bay Bucks and say, that ain't the paper bag Tampa Bay Bucks. So cultures change based on thoughts, words, and actions and what people subscribe to, and if you just ball out. I'm not a believer in that. I used to play against these Jets. Oh, my God. Vinny Testaverde, Keyshawn Johnson. Shout out to my dog, Wayne Corbett. Oh, Brian Cox. Neck roll to the sky, coming at you, spitting, Mo Lewis, like, etc. They had squads. You can even talk about Mark Sanchez in the AFC Championship games in consecutive years. But it's on Zach Wilson. And right now, you're okay if you're out there wondering, one, who is Zach Wilson? And more importantly, should you doubt Zach Wilson? Because there are still a lot of unknowns.
So I might have to take it a step further, big dog, because doubt means a feeling of uncertainty or lacking conviction.
Yes, yes.
I don't have doubts about him saving the Jets. He won't.
Come on, man.
And I'm not going to put that on his life, but still, let's be real, big dog. Let's not play favorites. Mark Sanchez, my dog, he was a really good quarterback at USC. Won a lot of football games at USC, even though I believe he was only 1-year starter. He didn't save the Jets. Let's talk about Geno Smith. Geno Smith was a dog at West Virginia with Tavon Austin, Stedman Bailey. Led one of the most prolific offenses in college football since the 2010s. I remember watching him in Austin, Texas, dismantle a very quality Texas defense. Geno Smith ain't saved the Jets. Let's talk recent. Sam Darnold, you know this one for sure, was a dude.
Yes.
A dude at USC. I was a college football analyst. It was my occupation to study all the quarterbacks, and Sam Darnold was a dude. That's why it was taken top 5 overall. He ain't saved the Jets. Greater men than Zach Wilson have failed. So how are we now going to speak with some sort of conviction or authority and believe that Zach Wilson will save the Jets? And here's the biggest thing. If you hear nothing else, hear this. It's not going to be Zach Wilson's fault.
Okay.
Like, if you hear nothing else from this whole block, understand, it's not an indictment on Zach Wilson, but I've said it before. If I stand on a chair and you stand on the ground, it is easier for you to pull me down than for me to lift you up. Zach Wilson is standing on a chair right now, a pedestal, literally, #2 overall pick if the Jets do, in fact, take him. It is much easier for the Jets organization to pull Zach Wilson down, as Mark Sanchez, you could argue, was pulled down, as Geno Smith was definitely pulled down, if Sam Darnold was pulled to the depths depths of the dirt of the ground, it's much easier to be pulled down. So it's not going to be Zach Wilson's fault. But if you're a defensive head coach, which Robert Saleh is, and he comes in and he said just as recently as last week, I'm not going to prioritize the quarterback position or overly prioritize the quarterback position, it's not even going to be his fault. Todd Bowles, great defensive mind, just as good a defensive mind as Robert Saleh, became the Jets head coach. Todd Bowles acquires Sam Darnold. Todd Bowles does nothing with Sam Darnold. I'm not going to blame Todd Bowles, but what I am going to say is this. We've seen greater quarterbacks than Zach Wilson fail. I'm not going to bank on Zach Wilson succeeding.
Careful of that greater quarterbacks than Zach Wilson talk. You're talking to a small school player over here. Greater is relative. It's not absolute. So I watched the draft. I think I was the 9th defensive end chosen. And I think one day we did on the show, Max Kellerman and he said, let's redraft your draft class, because he was trying to clown. He said, would you go higher or lower? I would have went higher because of achievement. But by perception, I would have went where I went, 52nd. People said, you played against accountants and nerds. People said, oh, those muscles ain't going to translate to NFL. You don't have that experience. Be careful, because a lot of people, when you talk about the 3 names I'm going to talk about, had their question marks, but they were protected in part because they went to bigger schools, or their programs. Mark Sanchez, I remember, because I'm an LA guy. I'm covering USC. Mark Sanchez moved up the draft because of likability in interviews. He wasn't supposed to be top 5. He wants to be number 5. But by performance, when he left off the field last game at USC, he was not number 5. But you got in that interview room, et cetera, whatever, the freckles, I don't know what it was, but people start saying, move him up. Geno Smith, there were question marks about his processor. Let's just be rim. His RAM, whatever the hell. People were like, Geno, It came out in different forms, different fashions. But I'm just pointing out the question marks that don't get highlighted when you're at a big program like they do when you're at a smaller school. Sam Darnold. As much as I love Sam Darnold,
he was a dude. He was a dude.
And then there were some times where you're like, that interception was unnecessary.
Sure.
And then that one was too, because you were such a dude, you got a little too arrogant with the arm. All I'm saying. Sam Darnold got a raw deal with the Jets. I give you that. But Sam Darnold's coach with the Jets is not going to be Zach Wilson's coach with the Jets. Sam Darnold is not the same as Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, first 2 years, 8-8. And you're like, once again, he's not a number 2 overall pick in the first 2 years. What happens last year? 11-1. Forget the record. Second best efficiency in college football and second best completion percentage in football. All of a sudden you start to say, is he doing this? Is this a smaller school player actually rising? Only player in the country to have more than 40 touchdowns and fewer than 5 turnovers last year. That's all I'm saying. I've been through this process on a much smaller scale where people started to take notice. The year before my senior year, I wasn't even on the draft board. I was an undrafted free agent if I were lucky. And what happened was 2 things. Now, this is different, but I got to bring it up. One, I went to one of those regional combines that come to the school, and I ran my 40. And they was like, wait a minute, run it again. And I ran it again. They was like, damn, you big to be running that fast. So that got a little buzz. What got me the most buzz, they were scouting another offensive lineman, top 3 rounds, they said, and he was a beast. Now, you're talking about rich. He was so rich, he didn't even go to the NFL. He was like, nah, I'm good. I don't want to take the banging on the head, etc. Silly. Anyway, I dominated against him. And all of a sudden, that's where the buzz took off. That's how I got noticed. Zach Wilson, bigger stage than me, but not as big a stage as these other quarterbacks that faltered. With a new situation, with a new head coach who's trying to build around him like they did with Mark Sanchez, this kid still has a chance for success.
He has a chance. See, it's hard to say he doesn't have a chance.
Well, you said he didn't.
Yes. Because,
so which take do you want?
Because I will adhere to your take.
Oh,
I can understand you saying he has a chance. But that's only for the sake of being kind on television. Okay? Realistically speaking, I'm not indicting Zach Wilson for going to BYU. It had nothing to do with going to a small school. It has everything to do with the Jets, Jets. So, 4 out of the last 5 seasons, losing seasons. Haven't made the playoffs since 2010.
I'm listening.
Haven't had a winning season since 2015, 4 out of the last 5 seasons, double-digit losses. Offense, since the year 2000, has only finished in the top 10 once, and they were 10th, back when they had Brandon Marshall at wide receiver. So, it's not even about Zach Wilson. Like, it has literally nothing to do with him. Bruh, put Trevor Lawrence on the Jets, and my take would flutter a tidbit. Like, put the great Trevor Lawrence, and my take would barely move. Again, I bring up history. Carson Palmer, he didn't save the Bengals. Took him to the playoffs, but he didn't save the Bengals.
What does saving the Bengals mean?
I think
Super Bowl
saving is resurrecting. Looking at what Andrew Luck did.
Ocho Cinco, Houston Zada.
Look, saving is resurrecting.
Palmer.
Look at what Andrew Luck did with the Colts. That is
That's not resurrecting. That's taking Peyton's.
Exactly.
That's taking Peyton's red shirt year and continuing what he already did.
Exactly.
That's not resurrecting.
Because my point is this.
Alive.
The only reason Andrew Luck succeeded in the manner he succeeded was because he went to a team that wasn't actually that bad. The reason Eli Manning had the success that he had instead of Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers individually as a career, much better than Eli Manning, every statistical metric. If Eli goes to the Chargers, I'm not convinced he has 2 Super Bowls nor 2 Super Bowl MVPs.
The 14-2 Chargers?
I'm not convinced.
I don't want to talk to you.
I'm not convinced he got 2 Super Bowls nor 2 Super Bowl MVPs.
I'm right.
Top tier picks. Number